The screen showed nothing but empty static. Lisa Harper stared at it for the third time in 10 minutes, hoping something would change. It never did. Just gray and white noise filling the communications display like a snowstorm trapped inside glass. Still nothing? Jake Morrison asked from behind her. His voice carried that careful tone he used when he was trying not to worry the crew. Lisa knew that tone well after 3 years in deep space together. "Nothing, Commander," she said. She ran the diagnostics again, watching the green bars fill up one by one. Every system showed perfect. The equipment worked fine, but Earth remained silent. "All our systems check out. The arrays are functioning normally. We're transmitting on all the right frequencies, but nobody's answering." Jake moved closer to her station, his reflection appearing in the dark parts of her screen. His face looked older than it had when they left Earth. 3 years of deep space exploration did that to people. His brown hair had more gray in it now, and lines had formed around his eyes from squinting at distant stars. "Could be a solar flare," Henry Collins suggested from the science station. The older man pushed his glasses up his nose, a habit he had when he was thinking through a problem. "We've seen them disrupt communications before." "For 3 days straight?" Lisa shook her head. "We've tried during different windows. Morning, evening, middle of the night Earth time. Nothing." The bridge of the horizon's edge fell quiet except for the soft hum of the engines and the beep of various monitors. It was a good ship, built for long journeys into the unknown parts of space. They had spent 3 years mapping the outer edges of the Centaurus arm, cataloging new worlds and gathering data. It had been lonely work but important. They were supposed to check in with Earth once a month. They had never missed a check-in before. Claire Bennett looked up from her navigation console. She was young, barely 30, with blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail. "Commander, I've been thinking. What if we try to reach the colonies instead? Mars colony should be easy to contact from here." Jake nodded slowly. "Good idea. Harper, try Mars." Lisa's fingers moved across her console, adjusting frequencies and targeting their transmission toward Mars. The red planet was much closer than Earth, relatively speaking. If there was a problem with Earth's receivers, Mars should still answer. She sent the signal and waited. They all waited. Static. A cold feeling started to grow in Lisa's stomach. She tried again, double-checking every setting. Still nothing. "Try Luna Base," Jake said quietly. Luna Base, humanity's first permanent settlement off Earth, built on the moon more than 200 years ago. It had never gone silent. Never. More static. "Titan Station," Jake said. Static. "Europa Colony." Static. Danny Price stood up from his security station. He was a big man, former military with dark skin and a shaved head. His jaw was tight. "Commander, something's wrong. Really wrong." Jake stood in the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. Lisa watched him think, watched him process what they were all feeling. Fear had started to creep into the ship, invisible but real. "Collins, any chance this is some kind of equipment failure on our end? Something the diagnostics aren't catching?" Henry removed his glasses and cleaned them with his shirt. Another thinking habit. "I suppose it's possible. But we've tested everything twice. The odds of every single human settlement going offline at once are..." "Impossible," Claire finished. "Not impossible," Henry corrected gently. "Just highly improbable." Kate Sullivan entered the bridge carrying a medical tablet. She was the ship's doctor, a woman in her 40s with red hair starting to show streaks of gray. "I heard the comms were down. How long has it been?" 3 days since our scheduled check-in," Jake told her. "We can't raise anyone. Not Earth, not the colonies, not even the relay stations." Kate's face went pale. "My daughter is on Earth. She was supposed to send me a message last week." The weight of that statement settled over everyone. They all had people back home. Families, friends, lives they had left behind for this mission. The plan had always been simple. Go out, explore, come back. They were due to return in 4 months. 4 months and they would see home again. "We need to consider our options," Jake said, his commander voice firm and steady. "Harper, keep trying to make contact. Try every frequency, every protocol. If there's anyone out there, I want to know about it. Collins, scan for any unusual activity, stellar phenomena, radiation bursts, anything that might explain a system-wide communications failure." "And if we don't find anything?" Danny asked. Jake looked at each of them in turn. "Then we go home. We see what happened." "Commander, we're 8 months away from Earth at maximum burn," Claire said. That's a long time to travel without knowing what we're heading into. I know, Jake said. But we can't just stay out here. Not when Earth has gone silent. Lisa worked through the night trying every trick she knew. She sent out broad-spectrum distress calls. She tried old emergency frequencies that nobody had used in decades. She even attempted to contact the automated weather satellites that should be orbiting Earth. Simple machines that always responded to pings. Nothing worked. On the second day of trying, she picked up something. Not from Earth, but from somewhere near the edge of human space. It was faint, breaking up badly, but it was definitely a human transmission. "Commander to the bridge," she called over the intercom. Jake arrived within a minute, pulling on his uniform jacket. "What do you have?" "A signal. It's weak and old, maybe a few months. I'm trying to clean it up." Her fingers flew across the controls, filtering out noise, amplifying the signal. Slowly, words began to emerge from the static. A man's voice, tight with panic. "Anyone receiving this? New Horizon colony. Earth has stopped responding. Sent 3 ships to investigate. None have returned. Requesting assistance. Supplies running low. Please, if anyone can hear this," and the message repeated. An automated distress call looping over and over. Lisa checked the timestamp. The message was 5 months old. Jake's face had gone hard and cold. "Can you pinpoint the source?" "New Horizon. It's a mining colony about 6 months from here at regular speed." "Change course," Jake ordered. "Claire, plot us a route to New Horizon." "Sir, that will take us away from Earth," Claire said carefully. "I know. But if Earth went silent 5 months ago, then we need to know what happened. New Horizon might have answers." He turned to face his crew. "Rig for acceleration. We're going to push the engines hard. I want to get there in 4 months instead of 6. The crew moved to their stations, each one focused on their tasks. But Lisa could see the fear in their eyes. She felt it too. A deep, cold worry that had settled into her bones. 5 months ago, something had happened to Earth. Something bad enough that colonies were sending ships to investigate. Ships that never came back. And now the Horizon's edge was heading toward the mystery. Toward answers that Lisa wasn't sure she wanted to know. She kept trying to reach Earth anyway, broadcasting into the silence, hoping that someone, somewhere, would answer. But there was only static. Only the endless, empty quiet of dead transmitters and abandoned stations. Earth had fallen silent, and they were months away from understanding why. The mining station hung in space like a dead insect, dark and lifeless against the pale blue glow of Kepler 442b below. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Horizon's edge, studying the station through the view screen. Every window was dark. No running lights blinked on the exterior. The docking bay doors stood open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. "Life signs?" he asked. Kate Sullivan checked her medical sensors for the 4th time. Nothing. No heat signatures, no biological readings. If there's anyone alive in there, they're not showing up on any of my equipment. The station should have held 300 people, 300 miners and their families, working the rich mineral deposits in the planet's crust. It had been one of the newer colonies, only 15 years old, but it was prosperous. People had wanted to come here. "Power status?" Jake asked. Ryan Foster looked up from the engineering console, his young face troubled. "That's the weird part, Commander. The station still has power. Reactors running at 30%. Life support is active, gravity is on. Everything's functioning like people are still there. But the communications array is offline, manually shut down. Why would they shut down communications?" "I don't know, sir." Jake made his decision. "Prep a shuttle. Price, Bennett, Sullivan, you're with me. Foster, you have the bridge. Keep the ship ready to move if we need to leave quickly." "Yes, sir." Ryan's voice was steady, but his hands gripped his console a little too tightly. The shuttle ride to the station took 20 minutes. Danny Price sat at the weapons locker, checking pulse rifles and making sure everyone had sidearms. He didn't say much, but his movements were careful and deliberate. Claire Bennett piloted the shuttle, her usual cheerfulness replaced by focused silence. Kate Sullivan prepared her medical kit, adding extra supplies in case they found injured survivors. They docked at the main airlock without incident. The station's automated systems accepted their docking request. The airlock cycled normally, and the doors opened to reveal a well-lit corridor beyond. "Air quality is good," Kate reported, checking her scanner. "Temperature normal. Gravity at standard. Everything's working fine. Except there was nobody here. They moved through the corridors in formation, Danny taking point with his rifle ready. Jake and Claire in the middle, Kate watching their backs. Their boots echoed on the metal floors, too loud in the empty silence. The first thing they found was a cafeteria. Meal trays sat on tables, food dried and old but still recognizable. Chairs were pushed back like people had stood up mid-meal. A child's toy lay on the floor near one table, a stuffed bear with one ear missing. They left in a hurry, Claire said softly. They moved deeper into the station. Every room told the same story. Workstations abandoned mid-shift, computers still running, displays showing data that nobody was monitoring, personal quarters with beds unmade, clothes laid out, everyday life interrupted and never resumed. In the control center, they found the station's log computer. Ryan had been right about the communications array. Someone had shut it down deliberately 6 months ago. The last entry in the log simply read, "Following the call. Earth needs everyone. We're going home." The call? Danny frowned. What call? Jake studied the log entries leading up to the final one. Normal daily reports about mining operations, shift schedules, a birthday party for someone named Julie. Then, 6 months ago, the entries became strange. People reported hearing something. A signal, a message. The words used to describe it were vague. Beautiful, important, necessary, true. Within 3 days, the entire station had evacuated. They had loaded every available ship and left. The log showed dozens of ships departing, all heading in the same direction, toward Earth. They heard something that made them leave everything behind, Jake said. Something that made them think Earth needed them. Kate was examining a medical terminal in the corner of the control room. "Commander, you need to see this." The medical files showed records from the station's doctor, a man named Dr. Phillips. In his last entries, he had been documenting something strange. Neurological changes in the population. Unusual brain activity in the theta wave range. He wrote about people describing a signal that wasn't coming through the communication systems, but somehow directly into their minds. Dr. Phillips's last entry was clinical and disturbing. 70% of the population now reports hearing the call. It appears to be some form of directed communication, operating on frequencies that interact directly with human neural tissue. I cannot explain the mechanism. Those affected describe it as an invitation, though they cannot articulate what they're being invited to do, only that they must return to Earth. I have noticed no adverse health effects, though the psychological compulsion appears overwhelming. I will continue to document as long as possible, though I admit I am beginning to hear it myself. A signal that works on brains instead of radios, Claire said. Is that even possible? Apparently it is, Kate said grimly, and it made everyone leave. They searched the rest of the station but found nothing more useful. No bodies, no signs of violence, no indication of what had sent the signal or why. Just the overwhelming evidence that 300 people had heard something that made them abandon their home and fly toward Earth. Back on the horizon's edge, Jake called a meeting in the conference room. The core crew gathered around the table, faces grim in the harsh light. New Horizon colony is the same, Claire reported. She had taken a shuttle to the nearby colony, while Jake's team searched the mining station. Population of 20,000 gone, ships missing from every docking bay. Same timeline about 6 months ago. I found similar log entries. People hearing a call feeling compelled to return to Earth. So it's not just one station, Danny said. It's everywhere. Lisa Harper had been working non-stop since they arrived in the sector. I've been scanning for any transmissions in the area. I found 3 more distress beacons, all automated, all several months old. The pattern is consistent across every colony we can detect. Mass evacuations all heading toward Earth. Henry Collins had been analyzing the data they had collected. He looked exhausted, his usually neat appearance disheveled. I've reviewed Dr. Phillips's medical data. Whatever this signal was, it operated on principles we don't understand. It bypassed all conventional communication technology and somehow interfaced directly with human consciousness. The affected individuals described it as compelling but not forced. They wanted to go. They chose to go. But go where? Kate asked. Earth? We know Earth is silent. If all these people went there, what happened when they arrived? That's what we need to find out, Jake said. Foster, how are the engines? Running hot, sir, but stable. We've been pushing them hard. Keep pushing. I want to reach Earth as fast as possible. Jake looked around the table at his crew. These people had become his family over 3 years in deep space. Now they were heading into something none of them understood, something that had emptied out the entire human species across multiple star systems. "We need to consider the possibility that we're immune," Henry said quietly. "We were out of range when this signal was sent. We never heard it. That might be the only reason we're still here, still ourselves. Or it might be waiting for us," Danny said. "Maybe it only works at certain distances." Jake stood up. "Then we'll be ready for it. Everyone stays alert. If anyone starts hearing or feeling anything unusual, report it immediately. We're going in prepared with our eyes open." Over the next 3 months, they found 6 more abandoned colonies, everyone the same. People gone, ships missing, everything pointing toward Earth. The horizon's edge pushed through space alone in the vast dark, carrying the only humans who didn't know what had happened to their species. Lisa kept trying to contact Earth, broadcasting messages into the silence. She knew it was probably useless, but she couldn't stop. Her sister lived on Earth, her parents, friends she had known since childhood. Someone had to answer eventually, but no one ever did. The closer they got to the Sol system, the more anxious the crew became. They were heading home, but home had become a mystery, a question wrapped in silence. What would they find when they arrived? Would Earth be empty like the colonies? Would they find billions of people living normally, unaware anything was wrong? Or would they find something else entirely? Jake spent his nights studying the logs and data they had collected, trying to piece together the mystery. A signal that spoke to human minds, an invitation that no one could refuse, a call that had pulled humanity away from their homes and toward something unknown, and they were about to find out what that something was. The Sol system appeared on their screens like a ghost of memory. Jupiter's bands of color swirled in their eternal dance. Saturn's rings caught the distant sunlight and gleamed like ice. The asteroids tumbled in their ancient orbits, uncaring and unchanged. Everything looked exactly as it should, except for the silence. "Mars colony is dark," Lisa Harper reported, her voice flat from weeks of delivering bad news. "No response to hails, no beacon signals. Power appears to be offline." Jake Morrison stood at the center of the bridge, his arms crossed, his face carved from stone. They had been in the Sol system for 3 days now, working their way inward from the outer planets. Every installation they passed was dead. The mining operations in the asteroid belt sat empty and cold. The research stations orbiting Jupiter's moons were abandoned. Even the automated supply depots had been stripped clean. "Life signs?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "None," Kate Sullivan said. Greg Turner, their pilot, brought them into orbit around Mars with careful precision. The red planet turned below them, its dust storms and ancient valleys looking the same as always. But the lights of the colony, which should have been visible on the dark side, were gone. The orbital platforms floated dead in space, their solar panels pointed uselessly away from the sun. "There," Claire Bennett said, pointing at her navigation screen. "One of the colony ships. No, wait, multiple ships. I'm counting 15, 20, maybe more." They drifted toward the cluster of vessels. Colony ships, cargo haulers, personal shuttles, even a few mining craft. All empty. All pointed in the same direction, toward Earth. Their engines cold and their crews gone. "They made it this far and then left the ships?" Danny Price said. "Why?" Henry Collins was studying the readings from the ships. "These vessels don't have the range to reach Earth from here. They would have needed to refuel or transfer to long-range craft, but I'm not detecting any large ships capable of carrying this many people." "Then where did they go?" Kate asked. No one had an answer. Luna Base was worse. Humanity's first home away from Earth, the cradle of space exploration, sat dead on the moon's surface. The domes were intact but empty. The famous Armstrong Plaza, where tourists had once gathered to see Earth hanging in the black sky, held nothing but silence and accumulated dust. Jake led another away mission, searching the base for any clue. They found the same pattern as the colonies. People had left in an orderly fashion, taking nothing with them. The base commander's log spoke of the same call, the same compulsion to go to Earth. The last entry was dated 7 months ago. Back, aboard the horizon's edge, the crew gathered on the bridge to look at Earth for the first time in 3 years. The blue and white marble hung in space before them, beautiful and terrible in its silence. "It looks normal," Claire whispered. And it did. The clouds swirled over the oceans. The continents were unchanged, brown and green and familiar. The ice caps gleamed white at the poles. From orbit, Earth looked like it always had, like home, like the cradle of humanity. But the night side was wrong. Where there should have been lights, millions of lights from cities and towns and roads, there was only darkness, not even a flicker, as if someone had turned off every light on the planet at once. Scanning for life signs, Kate said, her fingers moving across her console with desperate speed. Come on. There has to be something. Minutes passed. The scanner worked, through the atmosphere, penetrating clouds and searching the surface below. Jake watched Kate's face as she worked, saw hope drain away bit by bit. I'm reading plant life, animals, normal biological activity, Kate finally said. But human life signs? Nothing. Not in the cities, not in the settlements, not anywhere. Earth is empty. The words hit like a physical blow. Lisa turned away from her console, her hand over her mouth. Claire gripped the edge of her station, her knuckles white. Danny closed his eyes and took a slow breath. Henry removed his glasses and rubbed his face with both hands. There have to be survivors, Jake said. Billions of people lived on Earth. They can't all be gone. The scanners are very thorough, Commander, Kate said softly. If there were significant populations, we would detect them. Then we looked closer. Jake's voice was firm. Turner, bring us into a lower orbit. I want detailed scans of major population centers. Collins, scan for any energy signatures, any sign of technology still operating. Price, watch for any threats. If something took billions of people, it might still be here. They spent the next day scanning Earth from orbit. The cities stood empty, their buildings intact but lifeless. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, all the great centers of human civilization, hollow shells. Roads stretched between abandoned towns like veins in a dead body. Farmland had been left untended, though the crops still grew wild. Forests were reclaiming the suburbs, but there were no people, no bodies either. Just absence. Henry detected something on his sensors. Commander, I'm picking up an energy signature. Very faint, but it's definitely artificial. North America, Colorado region. Jake felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. Can you identify it? It's coming from inside a mountain, could be a bunker or an underground facility. The signature suggests a backup power system, something designed to run for years without maintenance. That's where NASDC was, Danny said. North American Space Defense Command military facility built to survive nuclear war. If anyone could have sheltered through whatever happened, it would be them. Set course, Jake ordered. Turner, bring us down. We're landing. The horizon's edge descended through Earth's atmosphere, the first human-crewed ship to return home in 7 months. They flew over abandoned cities and empty highways. Rivers flowed through unpopulated valleys. Wildlife moved freely through the streets of what had been human territory. They landed on a military airfield near the NASDC facility. The runways were cracked and overgrown with weeds, but still solid enough for their ship. As they set down, birds scattered from the nearby trees. The sound of the engines echoed across the empty landscape. Atmosphere is normal, Kate reported. Temperature 22 degrees, air quality excellent, actually better than it was 3 years ago. No biological hazards detected. Jake assembled a landing party. Danny, Claire, Kate, and Henry would come with him. Lisa and Ryan would stay with the ship, ready to lift off if needed. Greg would keep the engines warm. They stepped out into Earth air for the first time in 3 years. Jake took a deep breath, tasting home. The sun was warm on his face. A breeze rustled through the grass. It smelled clean, like rain and growing things. It smelled empty. They hiked toward the facility, following the energy signature Henry had detected. The path took them into the mountains, past checkpoints and barriers that should have been guarded but stood vacant. Security gates hung open. Guard posts were empty. The entrance to NASDC was a massive blast door built into the mountain itself. It was designed to withstand anything humanity could throw at it, and someone had left it open. Motion, Danny said sharply, his weapon coming up. Inside the entrance, something moved. They approached carefully, spreading out, weapons ready. Jake's heart pounded. After months of finding nothing but empty stations and abandoned colonies, the thought of finding another living person was almost overwhelming. A figure appeared in the entrance, backlit by emergency lighting from within. A man wearing a ragged military uniform, pointing a rifle at them with shaking hands. "Stop right there," the man shouted, his voice hoarse and cracking. "Don't come any closer. I'll shoot, I swear I will." Jake held up his hands slowly. "We're not here to hurt you. We're from the Horizon's Edge, a deep space exploration vessel. We just got back from a 3-year mission. We're looking for survivors." The man stared at them, his rifle still aimed but wavering. He was thin, too thin, with dark circles under his eyes and an unkempt beard. "Deep space? You weren't here when it happened?" "When what happened?" Jake asked carefully. "Please, we've been finding empty colonies for months. We don't know what's going on. Can you tell us?" The man's rifle slowly lowered, his face crumpled, and Jake realized he was crying. "You don't know. You really don't know." "Know what?" The man slumped against the blast door, sliding down to sit on the ground. "They left. Everyone left. The whole damn species just walked away and left us behind." "Who's us?" Kate asked gently, moving forward with her medical kit. "How many of you are there?" The man looked up at her with haunted eyes. 4. Just 4 of us. Out of 300 people in this facility. Out of 8 billion people on Earth, 4. He started laughing then, a broken sound that made Jake's skin crawl. "My name is Peter Hayes. Welcome home. Welcome to the empty world." Peter Hayes led them deeper into the mountain facility. Emergency lights cast long shadows on the concrete walls. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. The facility had been built to house 300 military personnel and support staff. Now it held 4 survivors and ghosts of memory. They found the others in what had been the command center. A woman in her 50s with gray hair sat at a communications console, still trying to send signals into the void. A young man, barely 20, worked on repairing equipment that didn't need fixing. A middle-aged technician sorted through supply crates, organizing and reorganizing things that were already organized. All 3 looked up when Jake's team entered. Their faces showed the same haunted expression Peter had, the look of people who had seen something break that should never break. "They're from a deep space ship," Peter said quietly. "They weren't here." "They didn't hear it." The woman stood up slowly from her console. "I'm Linda Shaw, communications officer. Or I was before it didn't matter anymore." The young man was Bobby Knight, a systems analyst. The technician was Carl Newton. They all had the same hollow look in their eyes, the same defeated posture. These were people who had survived something worse than death. Kate immediately began medical examinations while the survivors told their story. Jake recorded everything, knowing this might be the only chance they had to understand what happened to humanity. Peter did most of the talking. 7 months ago, something arrived in Earth's orbit. Not a ship, not exactly. It was hard to describe because it existed partly outside normal space. Sensors detected it but couldn't properly measure it. It was there and not there at the same time. And then it began to transmit. Not radio waves or laser communications, something else. A signal that didn't travel through space but somehow appeared directly in people's consciousness. Peter called it the invitation. Most people heard it clearly, Peter said, his hands trembling as he spoke. They described it as the most beautiful thing they'd ever experienced. Like music and mathematics and love all at once. It promised them something better. Transcendence, evolution, a chance to join something greater than themselves. The invitation came from something called the Galactic Communion, a collective consciousness made up of thousands of species from across the galaxy. They had all given up physical form to exist as pure thought, pure energy, pure whatever they were now. And they wanted humanity to join them. It wasn't forced, Linda Shaw said bitterly. That's the thing that haunts me. Nobody was compelled. They were offered a choice and they chose to accept. 99.9% of humanity heard the invitation and said yes. Bobby Knight was crying silently, tears running down his young face. My parents heard it. My sister, my girlfriend, everyone I knew. They all just smiled and said they had to go. They were so happy about it, like they were graduating or getting married or something wonderful. Within 3 days the exodus began. People simply walked away from their lives. They left their homes, their jobs, their possessions. They gathered in open spaces in fields and parks and stadiums. And the ships came for them, not human ships, vessels that appeared from wherever the invitation had come from. Great structures of light and impossible geometry. People walked into them calmly, peacefully, without fear. And the ships took them away, up into orbit and then beyond, toward something humanity couldn't begin to comprehend. The governments tried to stop it at first, Carl Newton said. He was methodically cleaning a rifle as he talked, his hands moving with automatic precision. Lockdowns, curfews, military checkpoints. Didn't matter. People who heard the call just walked right past the barriers. You couldn't stop them with guns or walls. You'd have had to shoot them, and most of the soldiers heard the call too. Within 2 weeks, Earth was empty. 8 billion people gone. The ships stopped coming after that. The invitation signal faded away, and the handful who remained, those who for whatever reason hadn't heard the call, were left alone on a dead world. Why didn't you hear it? Jake asked carefully. Peter touched the side of his head. Neural implant. Military grade. Designed to filter out certain frequencies in case of psychic attacks or enemy interrogation techniques. Pure luck that it happened to block whatever frequency the invitation used. Linda has severe hearing damage from an accident years ago. Bobby has a rare neurological condition that affects how his brain processes sensory input. Carl was in a shielded area running equipment checks when the signal came, and by the time he came out, he'd already rejected it. Rejected it? Henry Collins leaned forward. You mean you heard it and said no? Carl's hands stopped moving on the rifle. Yeah, I heard it. For about 30 seconds before I got back behind the shielding. And I said no. What was it like? Henry asked. Carl was quiet for a long moment. It was everything they said. Beautiful, perfect, promising. But I looked at what it was asking me to give up. My body, myself. Everything that made me me. And I thought about my kids, even though they were already gone by then. I thought about what being human means. And I said no. Has anyone come back? Kate asked softly. Any of the people who left? All 4 survivors shook their heads. Linda's voice was hollow. No one comes back. Once they go, they're gone. We don't know if they're dead or transformed or just somewhere we can't reach. The signal left markers in our brains. We can feel echoes of where they went. It's like a door at the edge of perception. We know it's there. We know we could still walk through it if we wanted to, but the invitation period ended 2 months ago. The door is closed now. Jake felt cold. The invitation had a time limit? 1 Earth year, Peter said. The Galactic Communion doesn't force anyone. They offer the choice and then they move on. Humanity had 1 year to decide. Most decided in the first few days. Kate was examining the medical scans she'd taken of the survivors. Her face was troubled. Commander, you need to see this. She showed him the neural patterns of the 4 survivors. Each one showed unusual activity in specific regions of the brain. Damage wasn't quite the right word, but there were definitely changes. Permanent alterations in their neural structure. The invitation signal left marks, Kate explained quietly, even on people who rejected it or never fully heard it. These 4 are experiencing chronic psychological effects, phantom sensations like hearing music that isn't there, dreams of places they've never been, a persistent feeling that they're missing something essential. Can you treat it? Jake asked. I don't know. Maybe. But Commander, there's something else. Kate pulled up a comparison scan. I tested your crew too, everyone who was on the horizon's edge. None of you show these markers. You were far enough away that the signal never reached you. You're completely unaffected. That was when Jake understood the full scope of what they were facing. The horizon's edge crew. 43 people who had been too far away to hear the call. 4 survivors in this facility who couldn't hear it or had rejected it. That was all. 47 humans who still existed as physical beings out of billions. Are there others? Jake asked Peter. Other survivors in other facilities? We've been broadcasting for months, Linda said. If there are others, they're not answering. This facility was hardened against electromagnetic interference. Other places might not have had people with the right kind of protection or luck. It might just be us. Danny Price had been quiet throughout the conversation, but now he spoke up. What about the colonies? The ones that were out of range? The signal reached out pretty far, Peter said. Mars heard it. Europa, Titan, all the close colonies. People came from across the system to Earth before the ships arrived. The only places that might have been out of range were the deep space stations and exploration vessels. Like us, Claire Bennett said, the ones who were too far away. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the empty airfield and the horizon's edge sitting alone on the tarmac. Beyond that, the mountains and valleys of Colorado stretched away, green and growing and utterly devoid of human life. "We need to search," he said. "Other exploration vessels, research stations beyond the signal's range, anywhere humans might have been when the invitation came. We need to find everyone we can." "And then what?" Bobby Knight asked. His voice was small and broken. "What do we do? 7 of us can't rebuild civilization." 47, Jake corrected. "My crew, you 4, and whoever else we find." He turned to face them. "I know it seems impossible. I know this is the worst thing that could have happened. But we're still here. Humanity isn't gone. It changed. It transformed into something we don't understand, but we're the ones who chose to stay physical. We're the ones who are still human in the way we understand it." "The leftovers," Carl said bitterly. "The ones who weren't good enough to transcend." "Or," Kate said firmly, "the ones who valued what we are enough to keep it. There's no shame in wanting to stay human." Peter Hayes looked at Jake with something like hope flickering in his exhausted eyes. "You really think we can survive? Rebuild?" "I don't know," Jake admitted. "But I know we're going to try. The species made a choice. Most of them went one way. We went another. That doesn't make us wrong. It makes us different." He looked at each of them in turn, his crew and the survivors. "We're going to search Earth for any other survivors." 3 months after returning to Earth, Jake Morrison stood in the ruins of the Library of Congress in Washington. Sunlight streamed through broken windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the still air. Books lined the walls, thousands upon thousands of them. Repositories of human knowledge gathering dust while nature slowly crept in through cracks in the foundation. Behind him, Lisa Harper and Henry Collins worked to catalog and digitize as much as they could. It was slow work. The library contained millions of items and they were only 3 people. But it was important work. If humanity was going to survive in any form, they needed to preserve what had come before. They had found 6 more survivors in the month since landing. A deaf woman named Susan Park, who had been hiking alone in Alaska when the invitation came. 2 scientists from an underwater research station, who had been deep enough that the signal couldn't reach them properly. A pilot named George Lane, who had been testing experimental shielding technology that accidentally protected him. 2 children, orphaned when their parents heard the call, found living in an automated farming facility in Iowa. 55 humans. That was all they had found on Earth. Henry estimated there might be another 100 scattered across the planet, but finding them would take years. Most people who survived were isolated, often struggling with the psychological effects of being left behind. The crew of the Horizon's Edge had taken on a new mission. They traveled the globe, searching for survivors, gathering supplies, and most importantly, preserving. They digitized libraries and museums. They secured seed banks and genetic repositories. They documented everything they could about human civilization, knowing that someday this information might be all that remained. Kate Sullivan had set up a medical facility in what had been Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. She spent her days treating the survivors they found, trying to help them cope with the trauma of being abandoned by their entire species. The psychological effects were profound. Many survivors suffered from depression, anxiety, and a persistent sense of loss that went beyond anything Kate had seen before. "It's not just grief," she had explained to Jake one evening. "It's existential doubt. They're questioning whether being human is even worthwhile anymore. If billions of people chose to give it up, what does that say about the value of what we are?" Jake understood that doubt. He felt it himself sometimes late at night when he couldn't sleep. Had humanity made a mistake? Were the billions who ascended now existing in some higher state of consciousness, while the survivors struggled to keep breathing and eating and maintaining bodies that suddenly seemed obsolete? But then he would walk through the empty cities and see what humanity had built. The art, the architecture, the books and music and accumulated wisdom of thousands of years. All of it created by beings with physical bodies, with hands that could hold tools and minds that could imagine futures. They hadn't been wrong to build this, and they weren't wrong to want to preserve it. Danny Price and Claire Bennett had taken charge of organizing the survivors. They established communication networks using equipment salvaged from abandoned facilities. They set up supply lines and transportation routes, Slowly, carefully, they were building the skeleton of a new society. It wouldn't be like the old one. 55 people couldn't maintain the infrastructure of billions, but they could maintain something. Small communities, sustainable systems, a way to live that honored what humanity had been while accepting what they had become. Peter Hayes and his 3 companions from NASDC had become historians of sorts. They interviewed every survivor, recording their stories of what happened the day the invitation came. They documented the end of one era of humanity and the beginning of another. Jake spent his time searching. The Horizon's Edge made trips to the asteroid belt and the outer planets, looking for other exploration vessels that might have been out of range. They found 2 more ships, the mining vessel Pathfinder with a crew of 12, and the science ship Discovery with 19 researchers aboard. Both had returned to find humanity gone. The crews joined the survivors on Earth, bringing the total to 86. It was Bobby Knight who had the idea for the message. He came to Jake one morning with a plan. They would send a signal, a broadcast powerful enough to reach the nearest stars. If there were other human vessels out there beyond the reach of the invitation, this signal would tell them they weren't alone. And we should tell them what happened, Bobby said. The truth. Not to scare them, but so they understand. So they know they didn't do anything wrong by not being here. They spent weeks crafting the message. Every survivor contributed something. Peter Hayes wrote about the invitation, explaining in clinical detail what had happened. Kate Sullivan added medical data about the psychological effects. Linda Shaw included technical specifications so other ships could find them. But the core of the message was simpler. It was Jake's voice recorded in the control room of the Horizon's Edge, speaking directly to whoever might be listening years or decades from now. This is Commander Jake Morrison of the deep space vessel Horizon's Edge. If you're receiving this, you were far away when humanity changed. You came back to find everyone gone, and you're wondering what happened. You're wondering if you did something wrong. You didn't. Humanity was offered a choice, and most of them chose to evolve beyond physical form. It wasn't wrong of them to choose that, and it wasn't wrong of you to miss the choice. You're still human. We're still human, and there are 86 of us here on Earth rebuilding, preserving, and surviving. You're not alone. They broadcast the message on every frequency they could generate. It would spread slowly through space, reaching distant vessels years from now. Maybe it would find someone. Maybe it wouldn't. But they had to try. Lisa Harper found Jake a week after they sent the message. He was in what had been the Smithsonian, standing in front of the Wright brothers' airplane, the first machine to achieve powered flight. I got a response, she said quietly. Jake's heart jumped. From who? Where? The research ship Endeavour. They were in the Epsilon Eridani system, conducting a survey. Crew of 33. They're 8 years out from Earth, but they heard the message. They're coming home, 33 more, 119 total. Over the next year, 5 more vessels responded. Small ships, exploration craft, research stations in deep space. Each one brought more survivors. By the time Jake celebrated his 53rd birthday, their number had grown to 207. It wasn't many, not compared to billions, but it was something. They established a permanent settlement in what had been Boulder, Colorado, close to the mountains near good farmland with access to resources they would need. The survivors came together there, building homes and farms and workshops. They held a meeting, all 207 of them, to decide what came next. Some wanted to search for the ascended humans, to try to make contact with whatever the species had become. Others wanted to focus on survival, on building sustainable communities. A few wanted to try to have children, to ensure humanity's physical form continued. Jake listened to all of them. The debates went on for days. People were angry, grieving, hopeful, scared. All of it valid. All of it understandable. In the end, they made a decision. They would do all of it. Some would search. Some would build. Some would preserve. They were too few to specialize, so everyone would do everything. But they would survive. They would endure, because that's what humans did. They adapted. They persevered. They found ways to keep going even when everything seemed lost. On the first anniversary of their return to Earth, Jake stood on a hill overlooking the new settlement. Behind him, houses with lights in the windows, gardens growing food, a school where they taught the few children, a library where they preserved knowledge, a workshop where they repaired equipment, All of it humble, small, fragile, but real. Kate Sullivan came to stand beside him. She had become something like a counselor for the group, helping people process their trauma and find meaning in their survival. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Jake asked her. "Staying physical, I mean. Staying human in this way." Kate was quiet for a moment, thinking, "I think there is no right choice. They chose to transcend. We chose to remain. Both are valid. Both are human in different ways. But are we enough?" Jake gestured at the small settlement. 200 people can't rebuild what 8 billion created." "No," Kate agreed. "But we can build something new. Something that honors what came before while accepting what we are now. We're not trying to resurrect the old world. We're creating a new one." Jake thought about that. About the children playing in the settlement below. About the farms and workshops and homes. About the message still spreading through space, reaching out to other survivors. About the library they were building, preserving human knowledge for whoever came after. They weren't the end of humanity. They were a continuation, a different path than the one most of the species had taken, but no less valid. "By the time we came back, the choice had already been made," Jake said. "We weren't there to participate. We weren't there to say yes or no. But we're here now." "Yes," Kate said. "We're here now. And that's enough." Below them, lights flickered on as evening fell. Not the billions of lights that once covered Earth,